The worst inspection ever. The worst inspection ever. My name's Mariam Hejazi. I've been helping people buy and sell residential real estate for over 12 years, and I have been loving Houston since 1987. Let's get into it. So, you have heard me say before that selling real estate is fun, but it's not for fun. And so, this just means like you should, as a realtor, know what you're doing and do this full time because it's such an incredible wide range of problems that you have to deal with. There are so many hats that you have to wear, and there are so many different circumstances that you have to walk your clients through. And it takes a lifetime to learn everything. And even then, you are always learning and seeing something new, like the worst inspection I have ever seen. And I have seen hundreds and hundreds of inspections over my tenure in the business, but this one by far just takes the cake. So let me just set the stage for you. So, this happened last year or in late 2025. This process started early 2024. So, as you know, I am the open house queen. I love to host open houses. And I think maybe in like January of 2024, I was hosting an open house and I was putting the signs out, and I see some people in the distance, and I'm like driving closer to the house, and I like recognize them from afar. And they turned out to be a set of my clients that I've helped multiple times buy and sell. And I looked at them and I was like, what are y'all doing here? Because this is not the neighborhood that they live in. They're like, oh, well, we're going to an open house. And I was like, this open house? And they're like, yes, this open house. And I was like, well, I'm literally the open house host. So come on in, help me turn on the lights. So we get to chatting, and I had just helped them build in kind of like a southern suburb of Houston, probably only 3 years prior. So, really, in new construction, the rule there is you need to stay at least 5 years for it to appreciate enough for you to get enough money out of it in order for a sale to make sense. But this one in particular, they built and purchased this home in 2020. And we all know, and from my previous videos and your own life experience, that houses or people that bought houses in 19 and in 20, it turns out that they made an incredibly wonderful decision to buy a house before the insanity of 21 and 22. So in early 2024, they actually had quite a bit of equity. And so a sale definitely made sense. And when they moved out of the city in order to get more space. And fast forward a few years, returning to office, turns out like they couldn't work from home every day, and they were now having to go from the suburbs to downtown, and it was costing a fortune in tolls. It was a ton of miles on each vehicle per day, and it was just like not a good lifestyle. It's not what they wanted for themselves. And you've heard me talk about like suburb life versus in the city life or in the loop. I've made several videos on where you can live in the suburbs if you work inside the loop or in downtown, and it really makes a difference. You should definitely go watch those videos if you're considering a suburb move, because these people moved out of the city to the burbs and then literally in less than 5 years moved back into the city. So they're like, well, we're ready to move back in the city. We're tired of driving. I said, okay, great. Well, let's start the journey. So we start looking at houses. They have honed in on an elementary that they really want. So when you hone in on an elementary, it greatly shrinks your area. And whenever you specify a neighborhood, it's so much easier. It's easier and harder because you know that only houses in this specific neighborhood are applicable to the search, but also it allows us to hone in on just one little pocket and we see everything on the market as soon as it comes on the market. So if you're looking, that's really what we need to do. But so we find a house. And this video is about the worst inspection ever because with these clients, thankfully it was these clients because they're amazing. But we found a house that we thought was great. It was great price point, great area, especially for the elementary and the location. Normally you'd have to pay like over $1 million to get here, but this one was a townhome. And actually, this is in the Westview area, and there are townhomes in Westview, and then there are like single family homes, like a traditional home with a yard and a driveway in Westview. And so, and right now in late 2025, just to enter into Westview, you're looking at least 1.4, if not 1.5, and to get a nicely updated house with shocker, laundry inside the house and not in a garage, it's really closer to about 1.6 to 1.75. So to find a townhome under 600,000 was awesome. And especially, if you get a great location and a great school, you may be willing to do work on a house that is a deal. Well, this house ended up being way too much work. And let me just tell you about this. So the scene has been set. It is, I don't know, maybe like, it's like spring 2024. I am incredibly busy. I think at the time I had like 10 or 11 houses under contract. And so I was just like, I had to be on purpose everywhere. I had like a certain amount of minutes wherever I was. And so this day in particular, I was at a closing and it was running longer than normal, which is fine. I go to all my closings, I go to all my inspections. And when I have a closing and an inspection at the same time, I am at both events, but I'm only at each event part of the time. So I had to leave closing early to make it to this inspection, but I was like lingering. And so we were all chatting at closing at the title company, and I know that this inspection is going on, but it's only like 8 minutes away. And so I'm like, okay, well, I can be there super fast. So I get a text from my client at the inspection, and he's like, hey, we're terminating. And I was like, I was got my phone, I was like, what do you mean terminate? I'm like in the conversation, I'm like, terminate. But I was like, what do you mean terminating? Like, do you want to like ask for something? He was like, no, we're terminating. There is a dead rat in the air return. And when I read that, I was like, I looked up at all the people I was standing around and I was like, I gotta go. Bye. And so the drive was like 8 minutes. Literally, I think I like peeled out of the title company parking lot and I made it there in 6 minutes. And I like put it into park and I like get into the house and I was like, show me. And so first of all, when I walked in, I see the inspector and there's a towel on the floor of the first floor. This is a 3-story, 4-story, 3-story. It was tall. And the inspector was like, well, when I turned on the shower, the water started coming through the ceiling. And I was like, oh, did you get a picture? He goes, no, I was too busy cleaning up the water. And I said, okay, fair, fair, fair. My client comes in and he goes, well, this is just the beginning. Do you want to see the bees? And I was like, the bees? What are you talking about? The bees? He was like, I got to show you the bees. And I said, show me the bees. So the inspector was like, okay, well, let's just start at the top and work our way down. And I said, okay, that sounds like a great plan. So we go all the way to the top and we start to unravel the story of the bees. So this is a very tall townhome in Westview, but it's one of the older builds. So Most of Westview was built in the 30s, but there are houses that are built on top of, or like in place of the old original 30s builds. And then on the outskirts of Westview, there are townhomes. There are several little pockets of townhomes, and these are single family townhomes, but townhomes nonetheless. And they range in price from anywhere from like 550 all the way up to 1 million, but there are houses zoned to Westview Elementary in the like 600 price point. You just have to know where to look. And so these were actually built in like the 90s, and it had a lot of deferred maintenance because if the house is built in like 97 and it's 2024 at the time, this house is like nearing 30 years of age. And if you haven't replaced all of the systems, like you're screwed. So we first start with the roof. And there's a very tall tree because trees can get really tall in 27 years or so. So there is a tree that has a branch on top of the roof. So like imagine the roof is here and there's a branch like right here and it has like an elbow. And this elbow is like it's swaying in the wind, and this elbow is like rubbing a hole in the top of the roof where the bees are getting in. So there is a bee colony in the freaking attic. And at the same time, we're really high up. We're on the top floor, and so we're able to see the eaves. And upon secondary inspection and a professional inspection, we see that there are portions of the eaves along the house that are not sealed. So the bees are getting in and out of the unsealed portions of the eave and through the hole in the roof. So we have a tall tree that needs to be removed. We have a tree touching the house, which we call that a conducive condition for termites because it's kind of like a super highway into the structure. So we have tall tree, we have a conducive condition, we have a hole in the roof, we have unsealed eaves, and we are just at the beginning. So we go down, and I had to take notes a little bit. And initially, at our first showing, my clients expressed some concern over some discoloration on the walls of one of the walk-in closets. And I am definitely skeptical, and like I've been doing this a long time and I've sold a bunch of like older houses, so I can point out problems as I see them, but I am not an alarmist and I'm not a pretend expert. And so I'll give you my opinion, but I'll also say like I'm not an inspector or I'm not a foundation person. Like this is my opinion. This is what I think is wrong, but we need HVAC guys to come in and verify that. So when we saw the discoloration, I say, okay, well, it looks like it could be mold, but of course, like I'm not a mold expert, so we will just ask the inspector to pay close attention to this. So turns out this is like legitimately black mold in this closet because there's elevated moisture in the house. And why would there be elevated moisture in the house? Perhaps because the HVAC system is literally non-functional. There are 3 AC units for this house. It's so big. And the inspector says, oh, hey, by the way, all 3 of the AC units are non-functional. So it needs a new roof. It needs 3 new AC units and there's black mold. And literally, I am not done with this video. So when you have limited ventilation, you have mold growth. But I mean, of course, there's a hole in the attic, so that doesn't count. Also, let's revisit this shower thing, this puddle on the floor. When we originally saw the house, I distinctively remember walking into the shower and looking down, and there's condensation on the bottom of the shower. And I said out loud, I was like, I wonder why it's wet in here. This house is vacant. It is not even, there's nobody here. There's barely any staging furniture in it. Why is the shower wet if nobody lives here? It doesn't look like somebody took a shower because the whole shower is not wet. It's just the bottom. Well, there was a leak duh, there was a freaking leak and lack of ventilation. So that shower leaks down to the first floor, down to the first floor. It's so crazy. So we have we have unsealed windows. The inspector was like, by the way, every single window is single paned original aluminum. Even though this house was built in the late 90s, in the late 90s they were still putting in single pane aluminum windows in some areas. Unfortunately, this is one of the areas. So basically, like all the windows need to be replaced. And then we kind of like revisit this AC issue. And my client was like so excited to explain to me the cherry on the top of this like insane inspection report. And in any time before and any time since, I just have never seen so many egregious problems on a house. That's not like 125 years old. There are better maintained 100-plus-year-old houses than this one. It was insane. So my client was like, can we talk about the dead rat? So I look at this photo in the inspection report, and it is a dehydrated possum. No lie. It is a dehydrated possum in one of the air returns. And you're like, okay, I know you probably have some questions in your head, so let me answer them. So first of all, Mariam, how the heck did you not know the AC was non-functional? When we showed originally, it was very cold outside. Like it was probably 35 degrees outside. And in Houston, if you live here, you know, when it's really hot, the feels like factor is like hotter than hot. So if it's like 90 degrees, the feels like factor could easily be 100 degrees. But same when it's really cold, it has to deal with the humidity in the air here. And so even though it was like 34 degrees that day, it felt like I think 25 and the wind was blowing. So it was really cold. So no need for the AC. So we didn't catch the AC problem. And also we didn't smell anything because one, it was super cold outside and the HVAC system or the AC was not on. But secondly, this animal was completely dehydrated. Completely. Of course, I did not touch it, but it was completely dehydrated. So all of the smell had already occurred. It's just, you cannot make it up. So okay, we have puddles, we have a leaky shower, we have bees, we have a hole in the roof, we have a tree causing the hole in the roof, we have black mold, we have all single pane windows that need to be replaced. We have all these AC units that are literally non-functional. So I mean, so roof, HVAC, a leak. I mean, we're looking at just like a ballpark. And of course, like I am not an HVAC person or a roofing person, but that alone is minimum, I'm going to call it 60 grand. I think it was $60,000. And that's not even thinking about any aesthetic updates. The kitchen needed to be updated definitely during their ownership. So we're looking at like, safe to say, probably $100,000 worth of work on like a $550,000 home. It just like doesn't make sense for my clients. And so like they are super checked out. And so my client wrote the inspector a check because you do have to pay the inspector even if it's a bad if it's bad results, you do still have to pay for your inspection. So my client paid the inspector and I drafted a release of earnest money and termination of contract. I have never seen my clients sign a document so fast. And so I emailed the listing agent the termination and release. And then I immediately call. Anytime I have a buyer that terminates like this, I send the termination to make sure I abide by the deadlines. If you want to learn more about the deadlines, I have a whole video dedicated to deadlines. I call the listing agent because it is so freaking rude and annoying. It is so rude to not follow up your termination by an explanation of some sort. Hopefully, it's a phone call because there's so much more that can be conveyed through the phone rather than just an email that you just hit send. So I always call, and that's what I did in this instance. And I don't believe in beating around the bush. And so when I have bad news, I just spit it out because I hate waiting for the bad news. So I don't do that to other people. So I call and I'm like, hi, Brittany. Brittany is not her real name. I'm like, hey, Brittany, it's Mariam for 123 Main Street. I'm calling to tell you there is a termination and a release of earnest money in your email. The inspection was so bad that we have to terminate. Like it was so bad. It's the worst inspection I've ever seen. And she was like, wait, what? I mean, because she thinks we're fine. And I thought we were fine up until maybe like an hour, 45 minutes prior to this phone call. And so I'm having to explain to her, and some agents do not want the inspection report. And this is like a potato thing in our industry because if you receive an inspection report, you now have to disclose that you have it. And if it is ever found out that a realtor isn't a realtor or a seller for a listing is in possession of an inspection report inside of the last 4 years in the past, they can be sued for not disclosing material facts. So in this instance, normally I would just send the inspection report, but it was so bad and this agent had been so good to work with that I was like, hey, I just sent you the termination and release of earnest money. And she was like, well, how bad? I was like, girl, it was so bad. Like, there's nothing the seller can do. There's just nothing. I'm so sorry. Like, because it brings me zero joy to ever terminate or receive a termination. Because remember, whether doesn't matter what side of this you're on. Buyers and sellers are like real people who need to buy and sell real estate. Like my clients need to buy a house, and this seller needs to sell their house. No matter what's wrong with it, they need to find a path to success. And whether that path is a drastic price reduction or them actually doing all of the work, they also need a path to figure out how to sell their house because there's a product out there for everyone. There's a buyer for every product out there. So, my clients paid an inspector for the inspection. They also paid for their option, which they will never get that money and time back. So it doesn't bring me joy to terminate. And to the listing agent's credit, she did request the inspection. And I say to her credit because some agents refuse the inspection. They're like, don't send it to me. Don't send it to me. And you can choose to be like that, or you can say, let me see the inspection report. And it really just depends on when you like came of age in the business, really. It doesn't matter what actual age you are. It matters what type of market you cut your teeth in. And it matters who were your mentors when you were learning the business, because it really takes about 5 years to like understand this business on a molecular level. And then by year 10, you are like an expert, but it's 10 years to expert and it's 5 years to like understanding it on a molecular level. And at year 10, you understand it at the molecular level and the different planes and maybe like a philosophical level. So the agent, I did send her the inspection report, and about a week later, she called me back and said, hey, the seller is replacing X, Y, and Z. Would your client still be interested? And by then, they had like just super duper checked out, which I probably would have too. They were like, no, man, I mean, it's a cool house. It's just not for us. Like, we are just not willing to say yes under any circumstances. So eventually, that seller was actually able to sell the house, and my clients did eventually get a great house, which they are still happy in today. And you just never know what the inspection will yield. I tell my clients all the time, like, we are not in love with this house until after option period. Because when you fall in love with the house, you like kind of handcuff yourself. You give up your negotiation power when you're like in love. So as a buyer, I always try to coach my clients of like, hey, we don't love it until after the inspection and after we're through option period. And same kind of like from the flip side with our sellers, with my sellers, like our goal is to make the buyer fall in love because when they love it, they'll stay with us no matter the problems. There's so many parallels in this business to dating and love, but that is for a different day and a different video. This was really a cautionary tale, but it really did happen. I literally have the inspection report. I still have the photos and the fond memories. But if you need an agent that is uber experienced in all things inspections, all things old houses and estates, and buying and selling at the same time, historically and architecturally significant, I am definitely your girl. Like, share, subscribe, and send this to someone who will find this entertaining or someone who needs to know. And again, my name is Mariam Hejazi. I've been helping people buy and sell residential real estate for over 12 years, and I've been loving Houston since 1987. I shall see you on the next one. Bye.